A parry is a fencing blade work maneuver intended to deflect or block an incoming attack. The primary function of a parry is to prevent an opponent's attack from landing, and I love it. I've been turned into a Pavlov's dog by video game developers. Just dangle a parry mechanic in front of me and I will start salivating. There is nothing more satisfying than deflecting an incoming attack from your opponent and opening a window to strike back. As Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, attack is the secret of defense. Defense is the planning of an attack. Parry is a very enjoyable mechanic, so no wonder developers figured out they need to put it in every game to stimulate our rotted brains.
Making a Mario game and make him parry the combo.
But honestly, I'm not complaining. In most cases, when you develop a combat system, adding a reaction-based defense option that allows you to deal damage in return will work great. The first game that comes to mind when I think of parrying is Sekiro, of course, even though the gameplay loop of Sekiro is more about continuously deflecting enemies' attacks to fill up their posture bar, which allows you to crit them. Another reason it feels so good to parry attacks in Sekiro has to be the sound design and visuals. Every time you deflect your enemy's attack, sparks fly out from your blades crossing, and you hear a very satisfying metal ding sound. And mind you, the main character is not the only one who knows how to wield a sword. Your opponents will also block your attacks most of the time, encouraging you to enter a dance. To spice things up, you have other options to evade attacks, like Mikiri counter for example, that lets you stop your enemy's thrust attacks by stepping on their weapon, driving it into the ground. So fucking good. Battles in Sekiro are like ebb and flow, and in my opinion it's From Software's most fleshed out combat system by far, even though you don't have as many weapon options compared to other Souls games. From Software were always famous for their simple but very enjoyable combat loop, and with Sekiro they went all out with parrying and staying in your enemy's face, but it doesn't mean that their other variants of parry are not cool as hell. Let's look at Dark Souls series and Elden Ring for example. Fighting a humanoid opponent with a similar weapon type is fun, yeah, but there is a different level of satisfaction I get from parrying some Lovecraftian horror creature 3 times as tall as me with my tiny bronze shield. Executing a parry in Souls games is not similar to Sekiro. Bosses are typically slower, and when you press your parry, you go into this long animation. Parry window is also not very big, so if you mess up, you're basically guaranteed to get smacked. Once again, From Software know their sound design, and a successful parry sounds like you just broke the boss's ankles with a sledgehammer. I'm quite happy that they made some enemies take multiple parries to get knocked down, cause once you figure out timings on their attacks, parrying them off cooldown can get a bit too easy. Alright, enough with Souls games. How about parrying in a very fast-paced game like Metal Gear Rising Revengeance? To be honest, for the longest time I couldn't figure out how parrying works in this game, and I don't think I could beat some bosses if I didn't look it up. Basically, you have to walk in the enemy's direction and press the attack button, which fits a game like that perfectly. Considering how fast the combat of this game is, making a separate button for parrying wouldn't make any sense, cause that would just slow you down in a game where you're supposed to constantly hit your opponents and go for a high score. So their decision to tie the parry mechanic to your attacks is quite genius. I just wish it was better explained how it works in the game, or maybe I'm just a dumbass. Hi-Fi Rush, a game I talked about previously in my video about style, also has an unusual parry, because like everything else in the game, it's tied to rhythm. So if you want to parry someone, you have to be on beat, which is certainly an interesting way to go about this mechanic. How about parries in a first-person game, like Ultrakill for example? Ultrakill is obviously a shooter game, but even here they managed to sneak in a deflect mechanic. If you have the blue arm variant equipped, you can parry most projectiles in the game, sending them where your cursor is, with increased velocity and bonus explosion damage. As you can see, even in a first-person shooter game, a parry mechanic can add something. Another game I talked about on this channel, Fury, has a very interesting approach to standard bullet hell, because it mixes long range, shoot the enemy dodge the bullets part, with close range melee fights that require you to parry bosses to hit them back. Some 2D platformer games also mess around with parrying. Hollow Knight for example has a parry mechanic, and I'm not even going to pretend I knew about it on my first playthrough. I'm pretty sure it's not explained in the game, like at all, but you can do it. I just still don't understand what the conditions are. In Katana Zero, great game by the way, most enemies die in one hit, and that includes the player, so having no deflect option in a game like that would be torturous, especially against enemies who shoot bullets at you. All of those games I listed happen in real time, but how would you implement something like that in a turn-based game? Well, apparently French people know how. Expedition 33 developers had a genius revelation. Wait, what if instead of players just watching how enemies attack them while they wait for their turn, we actually make those fights more interactive by adding a tool that requires skill expression and good timings to avoid damage and get benefits? Mes amis, that's genius. In Expedition, when your enemies attack you, you have two options. One is a dodge, it has more forgiving timing, but you also don't get much in return aside from avoiding damage. And then of course you have a parry option that has a more punishing timing but also rewards you with bonus action points on a successful parry and a juicy counter attack if you manage to parry every hit. That one addition to turn-based combat made it so much more engaging and actually fun. Now your preparation before the fight is not the only thing that matters, and if you actually get good with parrying, you can even fight opponents who outscale your party. To be honest, I can't imagine playing a JRPG without this mechanic now. So far I only mentioned single player games, but what if you put a parry mechanic in a game where different players interact with each other? I will use this opportunity to once again talk about a game I've been obsessed with recently, which is Deadlock, because it does feature a parry mechanic and in my opinion it's designed really well. Deadlock is a third-person MOBA shooter, so how would you possibly incorporate a parry button in a game like that? Well, just like most shooters, Deadlock also has a melee button, and you can do two different attacks with it. First one is light melee, which you do by just pressing the button. This attack deals low damage and doesn't have a lot of range, but it is absolutely impossible to react to. There are no visual clues that the character is going to perform this move and no audio indicators, so the only way to parry it is predicting it, which creates an interesting mind game you have to play with your opponent, because if you do get parried, it sends you in a very long stun, which basically guarantees that you die in most stages of the game. The second melee attack is heavy melee, which you can do by holding the melee button. This attack deals considerably more damage compared to light melee, but it's also very readable. When you perform heavy melee, your character goes into quite a long visually distinct animation that launches them forward, and most importantly, there is a very unique sound effect that tells you they're going for a heavy hit, which means you can react to it even if you don't see your opponent on your screen. However, as I said before, heavy melee launches you forward, and you can actually control your direction, meaning you can bait your opponent for a parry, and if you parry nothing, it goes on cooldown, allowing your opponents to hit you for free, because you no longer have any defensive option. But if you do manage to parry someone, your cooldown resets, which means you can parry two people back to back if they are dumb enough to keep punching you. There are tons of characters in Deadlock and they all have unique weapons, base move speeds, scalings, but timings for melee and parrying are the same for every character in the game, which always makes it a matter of skill, unless you play against Abrams who can pin you to a wall and fist you for free, of course. There are certain items that can change this interaction a bit, like Rebuttal that lowers your cooldown on parry, so even if you whiff it, you can get your second parry faster, or Unstoppable that makes you immune to pretty much everything in the game, so even if you get parried, you don't get stunned, but it still will block all the damage and reset the cooldown. This is one of the best implementations of parrying you can come up with for a multiplayer game, in my opinion, and I love how it's done. There are other multiplayer games you could name that have parry mechanics, but honestly I'm not familiar enough with them to say much, like For Honor for example, a game I've never played myself, but it has a parry mechanic from what I know, and I imagine in a game all about close combat with other players it has to be a crucial part. Or Street Fighter. I've never played Street Fighter 3, but the idea of a parry mechanic in a fighting game sounds very fitting and must add another level of skill expression, so no wonder the Evo Moment 37 became so legendary. To conclude, add parrying to every game ever made. Thank you for watching.